The leather chair sat empty. In courtroom 14B of the Manhattan Superior Court, that empty chair next to Julian Hartley represented more than a missing attorney. It represented the potential collapse of a $700 million empire. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the chaos that was unfolding in real time. Reporters packed every available seat, their cameras trained on the defense table where one of the most powerful tech billionaires in America sat alone, his blue suit jacket perfectly pressed, his face carefully neutral even as panic must have been clawing at his insides. "Mr. Hartley, where is your legal representation?" Judge Margaret Richardson peered over her reading glasses, her voice sharp with impatience. She was a woman in her early 60s, known throughout the legal community for her no-nonsense approach and her hatred of wasted time. Her black robes seemed to absorb the light as she leaned forward on the bench. Julian Hartley stood slowly. At 42, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had built a tech company from nothing into a global force. But even confidence couldn't hide the thin line of sweat forming at his temple. "Your Honor, I was informed that my attorney Richard Morrison would be here this morning. I have called his office 3 times in the past hour with no response." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. This was the trial everyone had been waiting for. TechVault Industries, Julian's direct competitor, had filed a massive lawsuit claiming that Hartley Tech had stolen proprietary code for their revolutionary data encryption software. The stakes were enormous. $700 million in damages. The future of Julian's company. The jobs of over 3,000 employees. Everything hung in the balance. Lawrence Crawford, the prosecution attorney, rose from his seat with barely concealed glee. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive gray suit that screamed old money. "Your Honor, the defense has had 6 months to prepare for this trial. This is simply another stalling tactic from a man who knows he cannot defend his actions." "That is not true," Julian said, his voice steady but his hands gripping the edge of the table. "I have no idea where my attorney is." Judge Richardson checked her watch. "Mr. Hartley, I am prepared to rule in favor of a default judgment if you cannot produce legal representation within the next 10 minutes. This trial has been scheduled for months. The court's time is valuable, as is the time of everyone present." 10 minutes. Julian could feel his company slipping away. Every eye in the courtroom was on him. The journalists were practically salivating. He could already see tomorrow's headlines: "Tech Titan tumbles," or "Hartley's House of Cards collapses." His phone buzzed with messages from his board of directors, all of them panicking, all of them demanding answers he did not have. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A young woman stumbled through, her breathing heavy as if she had been running. She wore a janitor's uniform, bright green with the Hartley Tech logo on the chest. Her name tag read Rochelle. She was beautiful in a way that was impossible to ignore, her dark skin glowing even under the harsh courtroom lights, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But it was her eyes that caught Julian's attention. Fierce, determined, burning with something he could not quite name. The courtroom fell completely silent. Then someone laughed. Then another person joined in. Within seconds the room filled with mocking laughter. A janitor had just interrupted the most important corporate trial of the year. "I am sorry, Your Honor," Rochelle said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. She walked down the center aisle, her cleaning uniform drawing stares and smirks from everyone she passed. "I can represent Mr. Hartley." The laughter grew louder. Judge Richardson held up her hand for silence, but her expression showed deep skepticism. "Young lady, this is a $700 million corporate lawsuit. Are you an attorney?" "No, Your Honor." Rochelle had reached the defense table now. She stood next to Julian, who was staring at her with complete confusion. "But I have studied law extensively. I know this case inside and out. And Mr. Hartley needs someone in that chair right now, or he loses everything." "This is absurd," Crawford interjected, though he was smiling. Clearly he thought this was the best possible outcome. "Your Honor, we cannot allow a janitor to represent the defense in a case of this magnitude." "Mr. Hartley," Judge Richardson said, ignoring Crawford for a moment. "Do you know this woman?" Julian looked at Rochelle. He had seen her before, he realized. Late nights when he worked in his office, she was there cleaning, emptying trash cans, wiping down surfaces. Always quiet, always respectful. He had never really looked at her, had never seen her as anything more than part of the background of his life. But now, standing here in this courtroom, offering to save him when no one else could or would, she seemed like the only solid thing in a world that was crumbling around him. "Yes," he said. "She works for my company." "And do you want her to represent you?" It was possibly the most insane decision he would ever make. A janitor representing him in a $700 million lawsuit. His board would call for his resignation. The media would destroy them both. But something in Rochelle's eyes told him she was not here as a joke. She was here because she believed she could win. Yes, Julian said. I want her to represent me. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Have you ever watched someone risk everything to save a stranger? What would you do in Julian's position? Would you trust someone the world was laughing at? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you want to see how this impossible situation unfolds, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what happens next. Judge Richardson slammed her gavel down repeatedly. Order. I will have order in this courtroom. When the noise finally died down, she looked at Rochelle with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Young woman, what is your name? Rochelle Bennett, Your Honor. Ms. Bennett, I cannot allow you to represent the defense unless you can demonstrate that you have sufficient legal knowledge to do so. This is not a small claims case. This is a complex corporate litigation with hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. I understand, Your Honor. Rochelle's hands were trembling, but her voice grew stronger with each word. I studied at Columbia Law School for 2 years before personal circumstances forced me to leave. I have spent the past 4 years continuing my education independently. I may not have a law degree, but I have read every filing in this case. I have studied every precedent the prosecution plans to cite. I can do this. Judge Richardson studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Julian. Mr. Hartley, I am going to allow this on one condition. If at any point I determine that Ms. Bennett is not competent to represent you, I will halt these proceedings and you will need to find proper legal representation or face default judgment. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Julian said. Ms. Bennett, you may sit in that chair. But understand this, I will be watching your every move. One mistake, one sign that you are in over your head, and this trial is over. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Rochelle moved to sit in the empty leather chair, and for the first time since the morning began, Julian felt something that might have been hope. Crawford was shaking his head in disbelief, but he was still smiling. This was going to be easy. A janitor against his 20 years of corporate litigation experience. He could already taste victory. Ms. Bennett, Judge Richardson said, the prosecution has already given their opening statement. You may give yours now. Rochelle stood. Her legs felt weak and she could feel the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on her. The journalists had their cameras focused on her. The spectators were waiting for her to fail. Even Julian, she could sense, was holding his breath, wondering if he had just made the worst decision of his life. She walked to the center of the courtroom. For a moment she could not speak. Her throat felt tight. But then she remembered why she was here. She thought of Tyler, her 15-year-old brother, lying in a hospital bed fighting leukemia. She thought of the medical bills stacking up, the nights she had cried herself to sleep wondering how she would pay for his next round of treatment. She thought of every night she had spent cleaning Julian Hartley's office, reading the documents on his desk, teaching herself the law because she could not afford to go back to school. Your Honor, members of the jury, she began, her voice quiet at first but growing stronger, this case is not about stolen technology. It is about competition. It is about one company trying to destroy another because they cannot compete in the marketplace. The prosecution wants you to believe that Julian Hartley is a thief. But the evidence will show that every piece of technology Hartley Tech developed was created in-house, by his own team years before TechVault Industries even entered this space. She walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each person. Over the next few days I will prove to you that this lawsuit is baseless. I will show you documentation, emails, and testimony that demonstrate beyond any doubt that Hartley Tech is innocent of all charges. And when this trial is over, you will see that justice, real justice, is not about who has the most expensive lawyer or the loudest voice. It is about the truth. She returned to the defense table and sat down. The courtroom was silent. Even Crawford had stopped smiling. Judge Richardson nodded slowly. Very well. Mr. Crawford, call your first witness. As the trial officially began, Julian leaned over and whispered to Rochelle, "Why are you doing this?" She looked at him and for just a moment she let him see past the brave face she was wearing. "Because someone has to. And because I know you are innocent." Julian did not respond, but something shifted in his chest. This woman, this janitor he had barely noticed for 4 years, had just put her entire life on the line for him. And he was going to make sure she did not regret it. The trial had begun and nothing would ever be the same. 4 years earlier, Rochelle Bennett had been someone completely different. As Crawford began questioning his first witness, a financial analyst from TechVault, Rochelle's mind drifted to the before times. She forced herself to focus on the testimony, taking notes in careful handwriting, but memories kept pushing through. Columbia Law School. The beautiful campus. The weight of law books in her backpack. The thrill of her first mock trial. She had been 22 and convinced the world was opening up for her like a flower in spring. Her parents had been so proud. Her mother, Angela, had worked double shifts as a nurse to help pay for school. Her father, Thomas, had driven a delivery truck and taken every overtime hour he could get. They had both stood in the audience at her college graduation, tears streaming down their faces, holding 5-year-old Tyler between them. "You are going to be a lawyer," her mother had whispered, hugging her so tight. "Our girl is going to be a lawyer." Then the accident happened. "Ms. Bennett," Judge Richardson's voice cut through her thoughts. "Do you have any questions for this witness?" Rochelle looked up. The financial analyst, a man named Gregory Walsh, had just finished testifying about the value of the allegedly stolen technology. She glanced at her notes, forcing her mind back to the present. Crawford had tried to paint a picture of massive theft, of Julian systematically stealing from TechVault. She stood, smoothing down her green janitor's uniform. She was painfully aware of how she looked. Everyone in this courtroom was wearing expensive suits, tailored dresses, polished shoes. She was wearing the same uniform she had mopped floors in just last night. "Mr. Walsh," she began, walking toward the witness stand, "you testified that the encryption technology in question is worth approximately $200 million. Is that correct?" "Yes, that is our assessment." Walsh was a thin man in his 40s, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a gray suit. "And how did you arrive at that number?" "Through a combination of market analysis, projected revenue loss, and the cost of research and development." Rochelle nodded. "Can you tell the jury when TechVault Industries first filed for a patent on this encryption technology?" Walsh shifted slightly. "March 15, 2021. "And when was that patent approved?" "October 2021. "Thank you, Mr. Walsh." Rochelle walked back to the defense table and picked up a document. She had spent 3 nights last week searching through the public patent database, cross-referencing every filing, following threads that no one else seemed to have noticed. "Your Honor, I would like to enter Defense Exhibit A into evidence. This is a patent application filed by Hartley Tech on January 8, 2020, more than a year before TechVault's filing." The courtroom stirred. Crawford stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This document was not disclosed in discovery." "Your Honor," Rochelle said, "this is a public patent filing. It is available to anyone who searches the database. The prosecution had the same access to this information as the defense." Judge Richardson examined the document. "Objection overruled. The witness may examine the exhibit." Rochelle handed the patent application to Walsh. "Mr. Walsh, can you confirm that this is indeed a patent application for encryption technology filed by Hartley Tech in January 2020? Walsh read through the document, his face paling slightly. "Yes, this appears to be such a filing. And you would agree that January 2020 comes before March 2021? "Obviously." "So if Hartley Tech filed for this patent more than a year before TechVault, how could they have stolen the technology from your company?" Walsh opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "The technology described in this filing is not identical to what we are discussing. But it is substantially similar, is it not? I would need more time to analyze." "Mr. Walsh, you just testified under oath that you are an expert in this technology. Surely you can recognize similarities between 2 encryption systems." Crawford stood again. "Your Honor, the witness is being asked to make technical determinations outside his area of expertise." Rochelle turned to the judge. "Your Honor, Mr. Crawford presented Mr. Walsh as an expert witness qualified to assess the value and nature of this technology. I am simply asking him to do what he claimed he was qualified to do." Judge Richardson nodded. "The witness will answer the question." Walsh looked uncomfortable. "There are some similarities, yes." "Thank you, Mr. Walsh. No further questions." As Rochelle sat down, Julian leaned over and whispered, "Where did you find that patent filing?" "Your office," she whispered back. 3 months ago you left the application on your desk." I remembered it. Julian stared at her. She had been cleaning his office for 4 years, and all that time she had been learning, reading, absorbing everything. He had been so blind. The trial continued through the morning. Crawford called 2 more witnesses, both former Hartley Tech employees who claimed they had seen evidence of stolen code. Rochelle cross-examined each one, poking holes in their testimony with questions that revealed inconsistencies and potential bias. By lunch recess, the prosecution's case, which had seemed ironclad that morning, was starting to look shaky. In the courthouse cafeteria, Julian and Rochelle sat at a corner table. She had removed her name tag, but the uniform still drew stares. Julian had offered to take her somewhere nicer for lunch, but she had refused. "I only have an hour," she had said, "and I need to review my notes for this afternoon." "Rochelle," Julian said, watching her eat a salad while simultaneously reading through documents, "I need to understand something. Why are you really doing this? You could lose everything. If we lose this case, if I lose my company, you lose your job. You lose your income. This makes no sense." She looked up from her papers. Her eyes were tired, he noticed. Dark circles beneath them that makeup could not quite hide. "My younger brother has leukemia," she said quietly. "Tyler. He is 15. The treatments cost more than I can make cleaning floors. I have been saving every penny I can, but it is never enough. Last month, the hospital said if I could not pay more, they would have to move him to county care." "I did not know," Julian said. "Why did not you tell someone? We have employee assistance programs." "I did. They said because I was part-time, I did not qualify for full benefits." She smiled, but it was sad. "That night, I went to clean your office like always, and you had left out the case files for this lawsuit. I started reading them. At first, just out of curiosity. But then I saw what they were claiming. I saw the lies. And I got angry. Angry enough to risk your job? Angry enough to realize that if I could win this case, if I could prove that someone like me could stand up in that courtroom and fight for the truth, maybe people would notice. Maybe doors would open. Maybe I could get back to law school. Maybe I could save Tyler." She looked directly at him. "You gave me a job when no one else would hire me. You never treated me like I was invisible. When I worked late, you always said thank you. You probably do not remember, but once, when I was crying in the supply closet because I had just gotten a new hospital bill, you walked by and asked if I was okay. You did not have to do that." Julian did remember now. It had been about 6 months ago. He had been working late as usual and had heard someone crying. The girl, the janitor, had been sitting on the floor surrounded by cleaning supplies. He had asked what was wrong and she had wiped her tears and said it was nothing, family stuff. He had offered to help, but she had refused and gone back to work. He had forgotten about it by the next morning. "That is not enough reason to risk everything for me," he said. "It is enough for me." She went back to her papers. "Besides, I believe in what your company does. I have read every report, every study. Your encryption software protects the medical records of millions of people. Hospitals use it. Schools use it. If TechVault wins and takes your company apart, people get hurt. Real people. So yes, I am risking everything. Because it matters." Julian felt something crack open inside his chest. He had spent so many years focused on profits, on growth, on beating the competition, that he had forgotten why he started Hartley Tech in the first place. He had built it because he believed technology should protect people, not exploit them. And this woman, this janitor who cleaned his floors, understood that better than anyone in his entire executive team. "Rochelle," he said, "after this is over, win or lose, I want to help you. I want to pay for Tyler's treatments. I want to get you back into law school. You should not have to choose between saving your brother and finishing your education." She looked at him with surprise. "You do not have to do that." "I know. But I want to. You are saving my company. Let me help save your family." For a moment he thought she would refuse. She looked like someone who had spent her whole life being told she had to do everything alone, fight every battle by herself. But then her eyes filled with tears and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "I accept. And I am grateful." They sat in silence for a moment and something passed between them. An understanding. A connection. This was more than just a lawyer and client. More than a billionaire and a janitor. They were two people who had found each other in the middle of a storm, and they were going to weather it together. The afternoon session began, and Rochelle stood before the jury once more, ready to dismantle the prosecution's case piece by piece. And Julian, watching her from the defense table, realized that the empty chair that morning had not been a disaster. It had been the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The afternoon sun streamed through the courthouse windows, casting long rectangles of light across the floor. Rochelle could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at her, but she pushed it away. Crawford had just called his star witness for the day, a technology consultant named Patricia Hughes, who had written a detailed report claiming that Hartley Tech's encryption software contained code sequences identical to TechVault's proprietary work. Hughes was in her 50s, wearing a maroon blazer and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who testified in court regularly. She had impressive credentials. A PhD from MIT. 20 years of experience in software analysis. She was exactly the kind of witness who could sway a jury. Dr. Hughes, Crawford said, standing near the witness stand with a tablet in his hand, you have reviewed both TechVault's encryption software and Hartley Tech software, is that correct? Yes, I have conducted an extensive analysis of both systems. And what did you find? I found 37 distinct instances where the code structure and algorithms in Hartley Tech software mirror those in TechVault's system. Not similar. Identical. She pulled up a screen showing lines of code. For example, this particular sequence that manages data packet encryption is character for character the same in both systems. The jury leaned forward, studying the screen. Several members looked confused by the technical jargon, but they understood the word, identical. That was damning. Crawford nodded. In your professional opinion, could these identical sequences have occurred by coincidence? Absolutely not. The probability of two separate development teams independently creating identical code across 37 different instances is statistically impossible. This is evidence of direct copying. Thank you, Dr. Hughes. No further questions. Crawford sat down looking satisfied. Rochelle could feel the shift in the courtroom. The jury had been warming to her underdog story, but hard technical evidence was different. She needed to be careful here. Very careful. She stood and approached the witness stand carrying a folder. Dr. Hughes, you have impressive credentials. MIT publications in major journals. You are clearly an expert in software analysis. Thank you. Can you tell the jury who hired you to conduct this analysis? TechVault Industries. And how much are they paying you for your testimony today? Hughes shifted slightly. I am being compensated at my standard consulting rate. $50,000 for the analysis and testimony. Rochelle let that number hang in the air. $50,000. That is quite a bit of money. It reflects the level of expertise and time required for this type of analysis. Of course. Rochelle opened her folder. Dr. Hughes, when you conducted your analysis, did you examine the development history of both software systems? I examined the final products, yes. That is not what I asked. Did you look at the development history? The version control logs? The dated backups? Hughes paused. My analysis focused on the finished software as it exists today. So you did not look at when each piece of code was written? The timestamps can be manipulated. I focused on the code itself. Rochelle nodded slowly. Dr. Hughes, I am going to show you something. She pulled out a thick binder. This is the version control history for Hartley Tech's encryption software, going back 6 years. Every change, every update, every modification is logged here with timestamps and developer notes. Your Honor, I would like to submit this as Defense Exhibit B. Judge Richardson waved her forward. Rochelle handed the binder to the clerk, who marked it and returned it to her. She approached the witness stand and opened the binder to a marked page. Dr. Hughes, can you read the date on this entry? Hughes looked at the page. February 12, 2019. And what does the entry describe? It appears to be the initial development of an encryption algorithm. The same algorithm you identified as one of the 37 identical sequences? The notation suggests it could be related, yes. Can you now look at this document? Rochelle handed her another paper. This is TechVault's patent application for their encryption technology. What date was this application filed? Hughes read the document and her face tightened. March 2021. So Hartley Tech was working on this encryption algorithm in February 2019, more than 2 years before TechVault even filed their patent application. Does that change your opinion about who copied from whom? Code can be backdated, Hughes said, but her voice lacked conviction. These logs are stored on independent servers with blockchain verification, Rochelle said. They cannot be altered without detection. Are you suggesting that Mr. Hartley somehow hacked blockchain technology itself to fake his development history? Crawford stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Richardson said. Ms. Bennett, rephrase. Dr. Hughes, is there any evidence that these development logs have been tampered with? I have not examined the logs for signs of tampering. Because you were not asked to. You were paid $50,000 to find evidence that Hartley Tech copied from TechVault, and that is exactly what you found. You did not look for evidence that might contradict that conclusion. I conducted an objective analysis. Did you? Rochelle pulled out another document. Dr. Hughes, Is it true that you previously worked for TechVault Industries as a consultant on 3 other projects? Hughes hesitated. Yes, that is correct. And is it true that TechVault has paid you a total of $230,000 over the past 5 years for various consulting projects? I would have to check my records, but that sounds approximately correct. So you have a long-standing financial relationship with the company that is suing Mr. Hartley. A company that has paid you nearly $250,000. And now they are paying you another $50,000 to testify that their competitor stole from them. Do you see how that might look to an objective observer? Crawford stood again. Your Honor, Dr. Hughes's previous work relationship does not invalidate her expertise or her findings. It speaks to bias, Your Honor, Rochelle countered. Judge Richardson looked thoughtful. I will allow the jury to weigh this information as they see fit. Continue, Ms. Bennett. Rochelle turned back to Hughes. Dr. Hughes, I have one final question. In your analysis, did you consider the possibility that TechVault might have copied from Hartley Tech? That was not the scope of my investigation. So you were specifically hired to find evidence that Hartley Tech stole from TechVault, and you did not investigate whether the reverse might be true? I analyzed what I was asked to analyze. Thank you, Dr. Hughes. No further questions. As Rochelle returned to the defense table, she could see the jury's expressions had changed. They were thinking now, questioning. The technical expert did not seem quite so credible anymore. Julian leaned over. That was brilliant. It was basic cross-examination, Rochelle said, but she allowed herself a small smile. I learned it from the case files I read in your office. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Crawford called 2 more witnesses, but each time, Rochelle managed to find the weak spots in their testimony. By the time Judge Richardson adjourned for the day, the prosecution's seemingly solid case had more cracks than a broken mirror. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. Mr. Hartley, is it true your lawyer abandoned you? Ms. Bennett, where did you go to law school? Is this relationship romantic or strictly professional? Julian put his hand on Rochelle's back, guiding her through the crowd. His security team formed a barrier, pushing the reporters back. They reached his car, a sleek silver sedan, and climbed inside. The driver pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos behind. In the quiet of the car, Rochelle let out a long breath. The adrenaline that had kept her going all day was fading, and suddenly she felt every ounce of her exhaustion. Her eyes burned. Her body ached. You did amazing today, Julian said. I got lucky. Crawford's witnesses were not as prepared as they should have been. It was not luck. You outworked them. You found things they missed because you have been studying this case for months, and they probably just reviewed their notes the night before. Rochelle looked out the window at the city passing by. People walking home from work. Street vendors selling hot dogs. A woman pushing a stroller. Normal life happening all around them while inside this car. She felt like she was living in some alternate reality. Julian, she said quietly, what happens if we lose? We will not lose. But if we do? He was quiet for a moment. If we lose, I pay the damages. The company survives, but in a weakened state. I probably have to sell off divisions, lay off workers. It will take years to recover if we ever do. I am sorry. For what? For not being a real lawyer. For probably making things worse by showing up today. Julian reached over and took her hand. The gesture surprised them both. Her hand was small in his, calloused from years of cleaning work. His was smooth, the hand of someone who had spent his life typing on keyboards and signing contracts. You saved me today, he said. A real lawyer would have shown up and done the minimum. You fought. You cared. That means more than any degree. Their eyes met, and for just a moment the rest of the world fell away. There was something in his gaze that made Rochelle's breath catch. Something warm and real and terrifying in its intensity. Then the moment passed. Julian released her hand and looked away, clearing his throat. We should go to my office. We have work to do for tomorrow. My shift starts at 8, Rochelle said. I clean the offices at night. Not anymore. As of today, you are officially my general counsel, at least until this trial is over. Your salary is $100,000 a year. Your brother's medical bills are covered. And you are not cleaning another floor. Rochelle stared at him. $100,000 a year. Her brother's treatments covered. It was more than she had dreamed possible. I accept, she said, and she meant it with her whole heart. Thank you. Julian smiled, and it transformed his face. He was always handsome, but when he smiled, really smiled, he was something else entirely. They spent that evening in his office, high above the city, surrounded by case files and legal briefs. They ordered Chinese food and ate it straight from the containers, reviewing testimony and preparing for the next day. As the night deepened and the city lights sparkled below them, Rochelle felt something she had not felt in 4 years. Oh. Julian's office occupied the entire top floor of the Hartley Tech building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Manhattan. Rochelle had cleaned this space hundreds of times, but she had never really looked at it. Not like this. Not sitting in one of the leather chairs as an equal rather than kneeling on the floor with a mop. The space was massive and modern. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was minimalist but expensive. Everything was in shades of white, silver and cool blue. But what caught her attention now were the details she had never noticed before. Family photos on a shelf. Julian as a young boy with his parents, both of whom had passed away years ago, she had read in an article once. A framed sketch of a circuit board with a child's signature in the corner. A worn paperback book about coding next to pristine hardcover business text. My niece drew that, Julian said, noticing where her gaze had landed. She is 7. Wants to be an engineer when she grows up. You are close with your family? Just my sister and her kids now. My parents died in a car crash when I was 23. I was in my 2nd year of building this company. He said it matter-of-factly, but Rochelle could hear the old pain underneath. They never got to see what it became. They would be proud. I hope so. He pulled out a chair for her at the conference table, where he had spread out dozens of documents. Sometimes I wonder if they would think I lost sight of what mattered, chasing growth and market share. Rochelle sat down, studying him. In the courtroom, Julian had been controlled, almost cold. But here, late at night with just the two of them, she could see past that armor. He was tired. Worried. Human in a way billionaires were not supposed to be. You built something that helps people, she said. That matters. Does it? TechVault is claiming I stole to get here. What if they are right? What if I took something that was not mine and built an empire on a lie? Did you? No. He said it with absolute certainty. Every line of code in our encryption software was developed by my team. I know because I wrote half of it myself in the early days. But that does not matter if I cannot prove it. Rochelle pulled a document toward her. Then we prove it. We have the development logs. We have the patent applications. We have the timeline. Crawford's case is built on the assumption that you copied them, but we can show that the opposite is true. How? She stood and walked to a whiteboard on the wall, picking up a marker. We need to tell a story. The jury is not going to understand technical details about code and algorithms. But they will understand a story about innovation, about someone building something from nothing, and then someone else trying to steal it. She began writing on the board, creating a timeline. January 2017, you start developing the first version of your encryption software. May 2018, first patent filed. December 2018, software launched. Over the next 2 years you gain market share in clients. Hospitals, schools, government agencies. Julian was watching her with interest now. And then TechVault sees our success. Exactly. Rochelle drew another line. March 2021, TechVault files their patent. But look at the dates. They filed after you had already been in the market for over 2 years. They saw what you built and they decided they wanted a piece of it. But how do we prove they copied us? Rochelle tapped the marker against the board. We need someone from inside TechVault. Someone who was there when they developed their encryption software. Someone who can testify about where they got their ideas. That would be Derek Palmer. He was their lead developer on the project. But he is the one who started all this. He is the one who claimed we stole from them. Then we need to break his testimony. Rochelle turned to face Julian. What do you know about him? Derek worked for me 5 years ago. Brilliant programmer but difficult. Always thought he should be running the company instead of working for it. We had a falling out over the direction of a project and he quit. 6 months later he showed up at TechVault. And then 2 years after that TechVault files their patent. You think Derek brought our code to TechVault? I think it is possible. Rochelle sat back down, pulling her laptop toward her. Do you still have his employment records? His work product from when he was here? Everything is archived. But it has been 5 years. There will be thousands of files. Then we start searching. They worked through the night. Julian ordered coffee from the all-night cafe down the street. They went through Derek Palmer's work history file by file, line by line. Rochelle's eyes burned with fatigue, but she kept going. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Julian insisted she take a break. You are going to burn out before we even get to the end of this trial, he said, gently closing her laptop. I am fine. You are exhausted. When is the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Rochelle could not remember. Between work, the trial preparation, and visiting Tyler at the hospital, sleep had become a luxury she could not afford. I will sleep when this is over. Rochelle. Julian's voice was soft but firm. I need you sharp tomorrow. That means you need to rest. There is a couch in the next room. Lie down for a couple hours. I will keep working. She wanted to argue, but her body was betraying her. Her hands were shaking from too much caffeine and too little food. Just 1 hour. 3 hours. I will wake you at 6. She nodded and stood, but her legs wobbled. Julian was there instantly, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. They were standing close, closer than they had been before. She could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive. She could see the flecks of gray in his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that came from years of staring at computer screens. Thank you, she whispered. For trusting me. For giving me this chance. You earned it. His hand was still on her arm, warm through the fabric of her shirt. They had found her some regular clothes to wear instead of the janitor's uniform, professional pieces from a department store, a red blouse and black slacks. But she still felt like she was playing dress-up, like any moment someone would realize she did not belong here. I am scared, she admitted. What if I make a mistake? What if I miss something important? You will not. How do you know? Because you care too much to fail. I have worked with the best lawyers in the country. $1-million law firms, Harvard graduates, people with decades of experience. But not one of them cared about this case the way you do. Not one of them would have spent all night going through old files because they thought there might be one piece of evidence that could help. That is why I trust you. Something passed between them in that moment. Rochelle felt it like electricity in the air. She wondered if he felt it too, this pull, this connection that seemed to be growing stronger with every hour they spent together. I should rest, she said, taking a small step back. Yes. Go. She walked to the adjacent office and found the couch he had mentioned. It was leather and surprisingly comfortable. She lay down, telling herself she would just close her eyes for a moment, and was asleep within seconds. Julian stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. She looked younger like this, peaceful. The stress and worry that lined her face during the day had smoothed away. He felt something tighten in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in years. Not since his last relationship had ended badly 3 years ago, leaving him convinced that building a company and building a life with someone were mutually exclusive goals. But Rochelle was different. She was fighting for him, risking everything, asking for nothing in return except a chance to prove herself. When he had offered to help her brother to pay for law school, she had accepted with grace and gratitude. No demands. No expectations beyond what he offered freely. He returned to his desk and continued searching through Derek Palmer's old files. Around 4:30 in the morning he found something. A series of emails from 5 years ago, right before Derek quit. In them, Derek was corresponding with someone at TechVault, discussing new opportunities and valuable contributions he could make. Julian's heart rate picked up. This was it. Evidence that Derek had been talking to TechVault while still employed at Hartley Tech, evidence that he might have taken proprietary information with him when he left. He printed the emails and added them to the growing pile of evidence. Then he made himself a fresh cup of coffee and kept working. He wanted to have something concrete to show Rochelle when she woke up. He wanted to give her ammunition for the courtroom. At 6 o'clock he went to wake her. She was curled on her side, her hand tucked under her cheek. He almost hated to disturb her. Rochelle, he said softly, touching her shoulder. Her eyes opened immediately, alert. What time is it? 6. I let you sleep an extra hour. You needed it. She sat up, running her hands through her hair. Did you find anything? Come see. They returned to his office and he showed her the emails. She read through them, her eyes widening. This is perfect. This proves Derek was already in contact with TechVault before he left your company. If we can show that he took your code to them. We win, Julian finished. We win, she agreed. They looked at each other and the exhaustion did not matter anymore. Neither did the fear or the doubt. They had a path forward. We should get ready for court, Rochelle said. We need to look professional. Julian glanced at his watch. The trial does not start until 9. We have time. Let me take you to breakfast. You do not have to. I want to. Besides, you need to eat something other than take-out Chinese food. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a small diner 3 blocks from the courthouse. It was the kind of place Julian never went to, with cracked vinyl seats and a menu that had not changed since 1985. But the coffee was hot and strong, and the pancakes Rochelle ordered were fluffy and covered in syrup. "This is my favorite place," she said, smiling for the first time in what felt like days. "My dad used to bring Tyler and me here on Sunday mornings. It is nice." Julian was having scrambled eggs and toast, simple food that tasted better than most of the expensive restaurant meals he normally ate. "Can I ask you something?" Rochelle said. "Anything. Why did you really let me represent you yesterday? You could have asked for a continuance. You could have hired another lawyer." Julian set down his fork. "I told you. I saw something in your eyes. That is not a good enough reason to risk $700 million. Maybe not. But sometimes you have to trust your instincts. And my instincts told me that you were not there as a joke or to get attention. You were there because you believed you could help. That is rare. Most people in my world are motivated by money or power or prestige. You were motivated by something else. Something real. Justice?" Rochelle said with a small smile. "Maybe. Or maybe just a good heart." He looked at her across the table. "I have been so focused on building the company that I stopped seeing the people around me. My employees became assets on a spreadsheet. You reminded me that they are humans. You reminded me why I started all this in the first place. To help people." "To help people," he agreed. They finished breakfast and walked to the courthouse together. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of spring day that made New York City feel almost magical. Reporters were already gathering on the courthouse steps, but Rochelle felt ready this time. She was not just a janitor in a green uniform anymore. She was a lawyer fighting for someone she believed in. And maybe, just maybe, she was falling for him too. The courtroom was packed again. If anything, there were more people than the day before. Word had spread about the janitor representing the billionaire, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Rochelle could feel the weight of their stares as she took her seat at the defense table, but she kept her head high. She was wearing the same red blouse from yesterday, and Julian sat beside her in his blue suit, both of them projecting confidence they did not entirely feel. Judge Richardson entered and everyone stood. "Please be seated. Mr. Crawford, call your next witness." Lawrence Crawford rose, smoothing his gray tie. "The prosecution calls Derek Palmer." The courtroom doors opened and Derek Palmer walked in. He was in his late 30s with sandy brown hair and a lean build. He wore a dark blue suit and an expression of practiced sincerity. Rochelle watched him take the witness stand and swear to tell the truth, and she felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This was the key witness. The one who could destroy everything they had built. "Mr. Palmer," Crawford began, "can you please tell the jury about your professional history?" "I have been working in software development for 15 years. I graduated from Stanford with degrees in computer science and engineering. I have worked for several major tech companies, including a 5-year stint at Hartley Tech." "And what was your role at Hartley Tech?" "I was the lead developer on several projects, including early work on their data encryption systems." "The same encryption systems at the heart of this lawsuit?" "Yes." Crawford walked to his table and picked up a folder. "Mr. Palmer, you eventually left Hartley Tech and joined TechVault Industries. Is that correct?" "Yes." "I left Hartley Tech in July 2019 and joined TechVault 6 months later." "Why did you leave Hartley Tech?" Derek looked directly at Julian, and Rochelle could see the bitterness in his eyes. "I left because Julian Hartley refused to give me credit for my work. I developed core components of their encryption system, but when it came time to file patents and take the product to market, my name was nowhere to be found. He took my ideas and cut me out." Julian tensed beside Rochelle, but she put a hand on his arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. "That must have been difficult," Crawford said with fake sympathy. "It was devastating. I had poured years of my life into that project." "And what happened after you joined TechVault?" "I helped them develop their own encryption software. I wanted to create something even better than what Hartley Tech had, something that would actually acknowledge the people who built it." "And during your work at TechVault, did you discover anything unusual about Hartley Tech software?" "Yes." Derek leaned forward, his voice growing stronger. "About a year after I joined TechVault, we started analyzing competitor products to make sure we were not infringing on anyone's patents. When I looked at the updated version of Hartley Tech's encryption software, I was shocked. Entire sections of code that I had worked on at TechVault were now appearing in Hartley's product." "Code that you had developed at TechVault?" "Exactly. Code that could not have existed when I was still at Hartley Tech. Someone at Hartley had stolen our work and incorporated it into their software. And the timing made it clear. They waited until their product was already successful, then they stole from us to make it better." The jury was listening intently. Several members were taking notes. Rochelle could see the case shifting in the prosecution's favor, could feel the momentum swinging away from them. Crawford pulled up a screen showing lines of code. Mr. Palmer, can you walk the jury through a specific example? Of course. Derek stood and approached the screen. This function here controls how encrypted data is transmitted across networks. I designed this at TechVault in early 2021. It is a unique approach that I developed from scratch. And here. He pulled up another screen. This is the exact same function appearing in Hartley Tech software update from June 2021. Not similar. Identical. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. No further questions. Crawford sat down looking satisfied. Derek remained on the stand, his expression neutral but with a hint of triumph in his eyes. Judge Richardson looked at Rochelle. Ms. Bennett, your witness. Rochelle stood. Her mouth felt dry. Her hands wanted to shake but she forced them to be still. She walked toward the witness stand, carrying the folder of emails Julian had found the night before. Mr. Palmer, she began, you testified that you left Hartley Tech in July 2019 and joined TechVault 6 months later. Is that correct? Yes. 6 months is a long time to be unemployed in your field. What were you doing during those 6 months? Derek shifted slightly. I was consulting. Taking time to consider my options. Consulting for whom? Various clients. Small projects. Can you name one? I do not remember off the top of my head. It was several years ago. Rochelle nodded slowly. Mr. Palmer, were you in contact with TechVault Industries while you were still employed at Hartley Tech? No. Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. Rochelle opened her folder. Your Honor, I would like to introduce Defense Exhibit C. These are emails recovered from the Hartley Tech server, dated between March and July 2019, between Derek Palmer and Thomas Wright, who was the CTO of TechVault Industries at the time. Crawford shot to his feet. Objection. These emails were not disclosed in discovery. Your Honor, Rochelle said calmly, these emails were recovered from our own server last night. They are company property and were available to the prosecution during discovery if they had chosen to search for them. Additionally, they are directly relevant to Mr. Palmer's credibility as a witness. Judge Richardson reviewed the documents. Objection overruled. The witness may review the emails. Rochelle handed the papers to Derek. She watched his face pale as he read through them. Mr. Palmer, can you read the date on the first email? March 15, 2019. And at that time, you were still employed by Hartley Tech? Yes. Can you read the subject line? Derek hesitated. Discussion of future opportunities. And can you read the first line of the email that you sent to Mr. Wright? Derek's jaw tightened. I am interested in exploring opportunities at TechVault. I believe I can bring valuable knowledge and experience to your team. Valuable knowledge. From where, Mr. Palmer? From my general experience in the field. Or from the proprietary work you were doing at Hartley Tech? Rochelle pulled up another email on the courtroom screen. In this email dated May 10, 2019, you wrote to Mr. Wright, and I quote, I have access to code and documentation that could accelerate your encryption project significantly. I am willing to discuss terms. What code were you referring to? I do not recall that email. It is from your company email address. Are you saying you did not write it? I may have been referring to publicly available information. Publicly available information that would accelerate TechVault's encryption project significantly? Mr. Palmer, were you planning to take Hartley Tech's proprietary code to TechVault? No. Then what code were you offering? Derek was sweating now. I do not remember. This was years ago. Rochelle let the silence stretch out. The jury was watching Derek carefully, and she could see doubt forming on their faces. Mr. Palmer, you testified that you discovered Hartley Tech had stolen code from TechVault in 2021. But these emails show that you were offering to bring code to TechVault in 2019, 2 years earlier. Is it possible that the code you are claiming was stolen from TechVault was actually code you took from Hartley Tech? That is not what happened. How can you be sure? You just testified that you do not remember these emails from 2019. Maybe you also do not remember whether the code originated at Hartley Tech or TechVault. Crawford stood. Objection. Speculation. Withdrawn, Rochelle said. Mr. Palmer, you testified that you left Hartley Tech because Julian Hartley did not give you credit for your work. Is that correct? Yes. Were you listed as a co-inventor on any patents? No. Why not? Because he cut me out. Rochelle pulled out another document. This is the patent application for the encryption technology in question. Can you read the list of inventors? Derek glanced at the paper. Julian Hartley, Patricia Chin, Michael Rodriguez, and Derek Palmer. Derek Palmer. That is you, is it not? Yes. So you are listed as a co-inventor on the patent. You were given credit for your work. Were you also compensated for this work? I received my regular salary. In addition to your salary, did you receive any bonuses related to this patent? Derek was silent. Mr. Palmer, please answer the question. I received a bonus of $50,000 when the patent was approved. So you were listed as a co-inventor, and you received a $50,000 bonus. Yet you testified that Mr. Hartley cut you out and gave you no credit. Which statement is true? He did not give me the credit I deserved. Or did he give you exactly the credit you deserved and it was not enough for you? Is that why you went to TechVault with an offer to bring them code? Because you wanted more money, more recognition, more power? That is not true. Then explain these emails. Derek looked at Crawford, but the prosecution attorney could not help him. I was exploring options. That does not mean I did anything wrong. Exploring options by offering to bring proprietary code to a competitor? Mr. Palmer, that is called corporate espionage. And if you took Hartley Tech's code to TechVault and then TechVault filed patents based on that code, then this entire lawsuit is built on a lie that you created. Objection, Crawford shouted. This is speculation and harassment of the witness. Your Honor, Rochelle said, turning to the judge, Mr. Palmer is the foundation of the prosecution's case. If his credibility is in question, the entire case falls apart. These emails prove that he had both motive and opportunity to steal code from Hartley Tech and bring it to TechVault. That goes directly to the heart of this lawsuit. Judge Richardson considered for a moment. Objection overruled. The witness will answer the question. Mr. Palmer, did you take any proprietary code or documentation from Hartley Tech when you left the company? Derek looked trapped. I may have kept some personal notes. Personal notes that included proprietary code? They were my own work. Work you did while employed by Hartley Tech, which means it belongs to Hartley Tech, not to you. Mr. Palmer, did you share those notes with anyone at TechVault? I do not recall. You do not recall, or you do not want to admit it? Crawford stood. Objection. Sustained. Ms. Bennett, move on. Rochelle looked at Derek Palmer. No further questions. As she returned to her seat, she could feel the energy in the courtroom had shifted. Derek Palmer was no longer the sympathetic witness who had been wronged by a billionaire. He was someone with questionable motives and a history of offering to share proprietary information with competitors. Julian leaned over and whispered, "That was incredible." Rochelle did not respond. She was watching the jury. Some of them were looking at Derek with suspicion now, but others still seemed uncertain. The case was not won yet. Crawford tried to repair the damage during redirect examination. He asked Derek to explain the emails to clarify his intentions. But the doubt had been planted and everyone could see it. When the court adjourned for the day, reporters swarmed Rochelle and Julian on the courthouse steps. Ms. Bennett, do you think Derek Palmer committed corporate espionage? Mr. Hartley, are you going to press charges? Is there a romantic relationship between you two? Julian's security team pushed through the crowd, getting them to the car. Once inside, Rochelle let out a long breath. I might have pushed too hard. You did what you had to do. But if I am wrong, if Derek did not take the code, he did. Julian's voice was certain. I know him. I saw the way he looked when you showed him those emails. He is guilty, Rochelle. And tomorrow we are going to prove it. They returned to Julian's office and worked late into the night again. But this time there was hope mixed with the exhaustion. They were building a defense. A real defense. And maybe, just maybe, they were going to win. Around midnight, as they sat across from each other at the conference table, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups, Julian reached across and took Rochelle's hand. Thank you, he said, for believing in me, for fighting for me. I do not know what I did to deserve this, but I am grateful. Rochelle looked at their joined hands. His was warm and strong, and something about the contact made her heart beat faster. I believe in doing what is right. And this is right. Is that the only reason? She met his eyes. No, she admitted quietly. It is not. Neither of them moved. Neither of them said anything more. But something had shifted between them, something that went beyond lawyer and client, beyond billionaire and janitor. They were two people who had found each other in the middle of a storm, and they were holding on. Rochelle had been staring at the same document for 20 minutes, and the words were starting to blur together. It was 2 in the morning, and she was alone in Julian's office while he had gone home to shower and change clothes. She had insisted he go, promising she would rest on the couch. But rest felt impossible when there was still so much work to do. The trial was going well. Better than anyone had expected. Derek Palmer's credibility had been damaged, and the jury was clearly questioning the prosecution's case. But Crawford still had witnesses lined up, and he was not going to give up easily. Rochelle needed something more. Something definitive. Something that would end this trial once and for all. She pushed away from the desk and walked to the window. The city spread out below her, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Tyler was sleeping in his hospital bed. She had visited him yesterday evening, and he had been in good spirits. The new treatment protocol that Julian's money had made possible was working. The doctors were optimistic. "You are going to win," Tyler had said, his voice weak but certain. "I know you are." "How do you know?" "Because you are the smartest person I know. And because you do not quit." She had hugged him carefully, mindful of the 4 lines and monitors attached to his thin body. He was right. She did not quit. Even when things seemed impossible, even when everyone else had given up, she kept going. It was what had gotten her through her parents' death, through dropping out of law school, through 4 years of cleaning floors and studying law in stolen moments. She turned back to the desk and looked at the stacks of documents with fresh eyes. They had been so focused on proving that Derek Palmer had taken code from Hartley Tech that they had missed something. She could feel it like an itch at the back of her mind. She sat down and started going through Derek's old files again, but this time she looked for something different. Not what he had taken, but what he had left behind. 3 hours later, as dawn was starting to paint the sky pink and gold, she found it. It was buried in a folder labeled Archived Projects, filed under a project name she did not recognize. The file was dated August 2018, more than a year before Derek left the company. Inside were detailed design documents for an encryption algorithm. And the algorithm was identical to the one TechVault had patented in 2021. Rochelle's hands shook as she read through the documents. This was not just similar. This was exact. Every function, every variable, every line of logic was the same as what TechVault claimed they had developed independently. But that made no sense. If Derek had designed this at Hartley Tech in 2018, and then TechVault did not file their patent until 2021, that meant... She grabbed her phone and called Julian. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Rochelle? What is wrong?" "I found something. You need to come back to the office right now." "What did you find?" "The proof. I found the proof we need." 20 minutes later, Julian burst through the office door, his hair still wet from the shower, wearing jeans and a green t-shirt instead of his usual suit. He looked younger like this, more approachable. Rochelle's heart did a small flip at the sight of him, but she pushed the feeling aside. "Show me," he said. She pulled up the files on her computer. "Look at this. These are design documents created by Derek Palmer in August 2018. Do you remember this project?" Julian studied the screen and slowly recognition dawned on his face. "I remember. We were exploring different approaches to encryption. Derek was working on this as one possible direction, but we ultimately went with a different design." "Why?" "This approach was innovative, but it had vulnerabilities. It was fast but not secure enough for the applications we were targeting. We needed something more robust." "So you shelved it?" "We archived it and moved on. That is standard practice. Not every idea makes it to production." Rochelle pulled up another screen. "Now look at this. This is TechVault's patent filing from March 2021. Read the technical description." Julian read and his eyes widened. "It is the same. Word for word in some places. This is Derek's design from 2018. "Exactly. TechVault did not develop this independently. Derek took his old work from Hartley Tech, the design you had rejected, and brought it to TechVault. They filed a patent on it, launched a product based on it, and then sued you claiming you stole from them. But if we rejected this design because it had security vulnerabilities, then TechVault's encryption software has the same vulnerabilities." Rochelle was already typing, pulling up reports and analysis. "And look at this. 6 months after TechVault launched their product, there were reports of security breaches affecting several of their clients. The breaches were never explained publicly, but if their encryption has the same flaws that Derek's original design had. The breaches were caused by those flaws," Julian finished. "Rochelle, this is huge. This does not just prove we did not steal from them. It proves they built their entire product on stolen work that we had specifically rejected." They looked at each other, and the exhaustion and stress of the past few days melted away. Rochelle felt tears pricking at her eyes. We can win this. We can actually win this. Julian moved around the desk and pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in a hug. She stiffened for just a moment, surprised, and then melted into his embrace. He was warm and solid, and she could hear his heart beating fast against his chest. Her face pressed against his shoulder, and she breathed in the clean scent of his soap. You are amazing, he murmured into her hair. Absolutely amazing. When they pulled apart, they were standing close, their faces inches apart. Rochelle could see gold flecks in Julian's dark eyes. She could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the curve of his lips. And she wanted, more than anything, to close the distance between them and kiss him. Julian seemed to be thinking the same thing. His gaze dropped to her mouth and his hand came up to cup her cheek. For a moment, they hung suspended in time, balanced on the edge of something that could change everything. Then Rochelle's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushing. We should get ready for court. Right. Yes. Court. Julian ran a hand through his hair, looking as flustered as she felt. I will call my IT team and have them verify these files, make sure we have everything we need to present this evidence. Good. That is good. Rochelle could not quite meet his eyes. I should go home and change. I will meet you at the courthouse. Rochelle. She stopped at the door and looked back. What you found, what you did, there are not enough words to thank you. She smiled. We are not done yet. But we are close. So close. 2 hours later, they were back in the courtroom. Rochelle was wearing a blue dress that Julian had sent to her apartment by courier, along with a note that said, You deserve to look as strong as you are. The dress fit perfectly, and when she walked into the courtroom, she felt different. Powerful. Like she belonged here. Crawford called his next witness, a cybersecurity expert who testified about the sophistication of TechVault's encryption technology. It was a last-ditch effort to shore up his case after Derek's damaged credibility. But Rochelle could barely focus on the testimony. She was waiting for her moment. When it was time for cross-examination, she stood and said, Your Honor, I have no questions for this witness. However, I would like to recall Derek Palmer to the stand. Crawford shot to his feet. Objection. The defense cannot recall a prosecution witness. Your Honor, we have discovered new evidence that directly relates to Mr. Palmer's testimony. The defense requests permission to recall him for further questioning. Judge Richardson looked intrigued. What new evidence? Evidence that Derek Palmer took work product from Hartley Tech and used it to develop TechVault's encryption software. Evidence that proves this entire lawsuit is based on technology that Hartley Tech developed and rejected years before TechVault ever filed their patent. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Crawford was arguing loudly, but Judge Richardson held up her hand. Mr. Palmer will be recalled. Bailiff, please bring him in. Derek Palmer entered the courtroom looking wary. He took the witness stand again, and Judge Richardson reminded him that he was still under oath. Rochelle approached with a tablet in her hand. Mr. Palmer, do you remember working on a project at Hartley Tech code-named CypherX? Derek's expression became guarded. I worked on many projects. I do not remember all the code names. Let me refresh your memory. CypherX was an encryption algorithm you designed in August 2018. You spent 3 months on it before the project was archived. Do you remember now? Vaguely. Why was it archived? I do not recall. Rochelle pulled up the design documents on the screen. These are the original design documents you created. And here. She pulled up another screen, is TechVault's patent filing from March 2021. Mr. Palmer, are these not identical? Derek stared at the two screens. The courtroom was dead silent. They may have some similarities. Some similarities? Mr. Palmer, the code structure is identical. The variable names are identical. Even the comments in the code are identical. How do you explain that? The design principles are common in the field. Then why did not you mention this connection when you first claimed that Hartley Tech had stolen from TechVault? If you knew this algorithm originated from your work at Hartley Tech, why did you claim the theft went in the opposite direction? Derek had no answer. His face was red and he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Palmer, Rochelle continued, why was the CypherX project archived at Hartley Tech? I do not remember. Let me help you remember. It was archived because during security testing, several critical vulnerabilities were discovered. The encryption was fast but it was not secure. Is that correct? Derek said nothing. And 6 months after TechVault launched their encryption product based on this same design, there were multiple security breaches affecting TechVault clients. breaches that were never fully explained. Mr. Palmer, did those breaches occur because TechVault's encryption had the same vulnerabilities that caused Hartley Tech to reject your original design? I cannot speak to TechVault's security record. But you can speak to whether you took a rejected design from Hartley Tech and presented it to TechVault as your own work. You can speak to whether this entire lawsuit is based on a lie that you created. Can you not? Crawford was on his feet. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Richardson said, but she was looking at Derek with a very different expression than she had earlier in the trial. Rochelle turned to the jury. Your Honor, the defense moves to enter into evidence the complete CipherX project files from August 2018, including all design documents, security testing results, and the final recommendation to archive the project due to security concerns. So moved. Mr. Crawford, do you wish to examine these documents? Crawford was flipping through papers, consulting with his legal team. Your Honor, we request a recess to review this new evidence. Granted. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9. As people filed out of the courtroom, Rochelle and Julian sat at the defense table, both of them too stunned to move. They had done it. They had found the smoking gun. I cannot believe you found that, Julian said. I had completely forgotten about CipherX. That is what Derek was counting on. He thought no one would remember a failed project from 5 years ago. But he forgot that someone had been reading all your old files for 4 years. Julian took her hand across the table, and this time neither of them pulled away. We are going to win this. We are going to win this, she agreed. Are you rooting for Rochelle and Julian? Do you think Derek will finally admit the truth? Let me know in the comments what you think happens next, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the incredible conclusion to this story. That night, they celebrated with dinner at a real restaurant. Not takeout, not the courthouse cafeteria, but a beautiful Italian place with white tablecloths and candles. Julian had reserved a private corner table, away from the prying eyes of reporters and curious onlookers. I could get used to this, Rochelle said, savoring a bite of perfectly cooked pasta. You should get used to it. After this trial, you are going to be the most sought-after attorney in New York. I'm not even a licensed attorney yet. You will be. I meant what I said about law school. As soon as this trial is over, I want you to apply. Wherever you want to go. I will cover all expenses. You have already done so much. Tyler's treatments are not optional. They are necessary. And they are not a favor. They are what I should have been providing all along for all my employees. You have opened my eyes to a lot of things, Rochelle. She looked at him across the candlelight. What kinds of things? That success is not just about profits and market share. It is about taking care of the people who make that success possible. It is about remembering that every employee, every janitor, every person who works in your building has their own story, their own struggles, their own dreams. You made me see that again. You are a good person, Julian. You just got a little lost for a while. And you found me. Their eyes met and held. The restaurant faded away. The trial faded away. There was just the two of them sitting across from each other, connected by something neither could quite name but both could feel. Rochelle, Julian said softly, when this trial is over, I would like to take you to dinner again. Not as your employer. Not as someone you are representing. Just as me. Would you say yes? She smiled. I would say yes. They finished dinner and walked out into the cool evening air. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of the trial. Tomorrow would bring victory or defeat. But tonight, walking side by side through the city streets, they were just two people who had found something unexpected in the middle of chaos. And it felt like the beginning of something beautiful. The courtroom was electric with anticipation. News of Rochelle's discovery had leaked overnight, and the press was calling it the twist no one saw coming. Reporters packed every available seat, cameras trained on the defense table where Rochelle sat in her blue dress, looking calm and professional. Julian sat beside her in a crisp white shirt and blue suit, and together, they projected an image of quiet confidence. Judge Richardson took her seat and looked out at the crowded room. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that this is a court of law, not a theater. I will tolerate no outbursts or disruptions. Is that understood? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mr. Crawford, I understand you have had an opportunity to review the evidence presented yesterday. Do you wish to make a statement? Crawford stood. He looked like he had not slept. His usually perfect silver hair was slightly rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Your Honor, the prosecution requests a recess to fully investigate these new allegations. Denied. The evidence in question has been available in the public domain since 2018. The prosecution has had ample opportunity to discover it during their own investigation. We will proceed. Crawford sat down heavily. Rochelle could see his legal team frantically passing notes, trying to salvage their case. But there was no salvaging this. She had them and everyone knew it. Ms. Bennett, Judge Richardson said, you may continue your examination of Mr. Palmer. Derek Palmer looked terrible as he retook the witness stand. His face was pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he was reminded he was still under oath. He kept glancing at Crawford as if hoping his attorney would rescue him, but Crawford was staring at his notes and would not meet his eyes. Rochelle stood and approached the witness stand. She carried a folder but she did not need it. She had memorized every detail, every date, every piece of evidence. This was her moment. Mr. Palmer, good morning. I want to continue our discussion about the CypherX project. You testified yesterday that you do not clearly remember this project. Is that still your testimony? I remember some aspects of it now after reviewing the documents. Good. Let us walk through what happened. In August 2018, you designed an encryption algorithm while employed at Hartley Tech. Is that correct? Yes. And this algorithm was subjected to security testing? All our designs were tested. And what did the testing reveal about your CypherX algorithm? Derek shifted in his seat. There were some concerns about performance under certain conditions. Some concerns. Can you be more specific? The algorithm had some vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed. What kind of vulnerabilities? Technical vulnerabilities. Related to edge cases in data transmission. Rochelle pulled out a document and approached the witness stand. Mr. Palmer, this is the security testing report for CypherX, authored by the Hartley Tech security team in October 2018. Can you read the summary section for the jury? Derek took the document and his face went even paler. The report states that the algorithm has critical vulnerabilities that could allow unauthorized access under specific network conditions. Critical vulnerabilities. And what was the recommendation? To archive the project and pursue alternative approaches. So the algorithm you designed was deemed too insecure to use. Is that a fair summary? The technology was ahead of its time. The testing infrastructure was not sophisticated enough to properly evaluate it. That is not what the report says. The report specifically states that the vulnerabilities are inherent to the algorithm's design and cannot be remedied without a complete redesign. Is that correct? Yes, that is what the report states. So Hartley Tech, acting responsibly, decided not to use this encryption system because it would put their clients' data at risk? They decided not to pursue it, yes. Rochelle walked back to the defense table and picked up another document. Mr. Palmer, after you left Hartley Tech and joined TechVault, you worked on their encryption software project. Correct? Yes. And you were the lead developer on that project? I was one of the lead developers, yes. In fact, Rochelle pulled up a press release on the courtroom screen. This press release from TechVault in May 2021 describes you as the chief architect of their revolutionary new encryption technology. Is that correct? That was how they described my role, yes. And this revolutionary new encryption technology was based on your CypherX design from Hartley Tech, was it not? Derek was silent. Mr. Palmer, please answer the question. The technology used similar principles. Similar principles? Mr. Palmer, we have already established that the code is identical. Are you now claiming that you independently recreated the exact same design you had made at Hartley Tech, down to the variable names and code comments? I built on my previous work. Your previous work that belonged to Hartley Tech, work that Hartley Tech owned because you created it while employed there. Work that Hartley Tech specifically rejected because it was insecure. You took that work to TechVault and presented it as a new invention. Did you not? Derek looked at Crawford desperately, but the prosecution attorney was staring at the table. I thought I could improve the design. Did you tell TechVault that this design was based on work you had done at Hartley Tech? I disclosed that I had previous experience in this area. That is not what I asked. Did you specifically tell them that you were using a design you had created while employed at Hartley Tech? A design that Hartley Tech had rejected due to security concerns. Derek swallowed hard. I may not have mentioned all the details. So you lied by omission. You let TechVault believe you had created this technology independently, when in fact you had taken it from your previous employer. I did not see it that way. How did you see it? I saw it as building on my own work. Work that belonged to Hartley Tech. Rochelle let that statement hang in the air. Mr. Palmer, After TechVault launched their encryption software in late 2021, were there security incidents involving their clients? I cannot speak to specific security incidents. You were the chief architect. You do not know if there were security problems? There may have been some minor issues. Rochelle pulled up a series of news articles on the screen. These are reports from December 2021 and January 2022 about data breaches affecting TechVault clients. Healthcare providers, financial institutions, even a government agency. Millions of records compromised. Mr. Palmer, were these breaches caused by the same vulnerabilities that Hartley Tech had identified in 2018? Derek stared at the screen and Rochelle could see him breaking. I do not know for certain. But it is possible, is it not? In fact, it is likely because those vulnerabilities were built into the core design, and you never fixed them. We tried to patch them. But the report from Hartley Tech said the vulnerabilities could not be fixed without a complete redesign. So every patch you attempted was just a temporary fix. And meanwhile, TechVault's clients were vulnerable to attack. How many people had their personal information stolen because you were too proud to admit you had taken a flawed design? Objection, Crawford said weakly. Speculation. Your Honor, Rochelle said, Mr. Palmer has admitted he built TechVault's encryption on his CipherX design. He has admitted that design had security vulnerabilities. And there is documented evidence of security breaches affecting TechVault clients. I am simply asking him to connect the dots he has laid out. Judge Richardson nodded. Objection overruled. Mr. Palmer, answer the question. Derek looked broken. I do not know exactly how many people were affected. But it was your design that put them at risk? Yes. The courtroom erupted. Judge Richardson had to slam her gavel 3 times to restore order. Rochelle let the chaos continue for a moment, let the jury and the spectators absorb what they had just heard. Then she turned back to Derek. Mr. Palmer, one final question. You filed this lawsuit claiming that Julian Hartley stole technology from TechVault. But the truth is that TechVault's technology was based on your work from Hartley Tech work that belonged to Hartley Tech work that was rejected because it was flawed. Is that correct? Derek looked at the floor. Yes. So this lawsuit is entirely without merit. Is that correct? I believed. I thought we had a case. You thought you could get away with stealing from your former employer and then suing them when they continued to innovate in the same space. But you were wrong. Objection, Crawford said, standing. Your Honor, this is badgering the witness. I withdraw the question, Rochelle said. I have no further questions for this witness. As she returned to her seat, the courtroom buzzed with conversation. Julian took her hand under the table and squeezed it. You did it, he whispered. You completely destroyed their case. Judge Richardson called for order. Mr. Crawford, do you wish to redirect? Crawford stood slowly. He looked at Derek Palmer, then at his notes, then at the jury. No, Your Honor. The prosecution rests. It was over. Crawford knew he had lost. There was no point in dragging it out further. Very well, Judge Richardson said. Ms. Bennett, does the defense wish to call any witnesses? Rochelle stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Julian Hartley to the stand. Julian looked surprised, but he stood and walked to the witness box. He was sworn in and took his seat, looking calm and composed. Mr. Hartley, Rochelle began, can you tell the jury about the early days of Hartley Tech? I started the company 8 years ago in my apartment. I was working full-time at another tech company, but I had ideas about data security that I wanted to pursue. I spent every evening and weekend writing code, building prototypes, testing concepts. What motivated you to focus on data security? My mother was a nurse. When I was in college, the hospital where she worked was hacked. Patient records were stolen and sold on the dark web. My mother spent months helping patients deal with the aftermath. Identity theft, financial fraud, medical records being used to commit insurance fraud. It destroyed lives. I wanted to build something that would protect people from that kind of violation. So you built Hartley Tech with the goal of protecting people's data? That was always the goal. I wanted to create encryption technology that was so secure, so reliable, that hospitals, schools, banks, anyone who held sensitive information could use it with confidence. And did you build that technology? My team and I worked on it for years. We tried dozens of different approaches. Some worked, some did not. The CipherX algorithm that Derek designed was one of those approaches that did not work. It was innovative, but it was not secure enough. So we kept looking. We kept iterating. And eventually, we created the encryption system that Hartley Tech uses today. A system that has never been breached, never been compromised because we refuse to cut corners on security. Mr. Hartley, Did you ever steal technology from TechVault Industries? No, absolutely not. Every line of code in our encryption software was developed by my team. We have documentation going back years showing the development process, the testing, the iterations. We built this from the ground up. And when Derek Palmer left your company, did he have permission to take his work with him? No. All work product created by employees belongs to the company. That is standard in the industry and was clearly spelled out in Derek's employment contract. So when he took the CypherX design to TechVault, he was violating his contract and stealing your intellectual property? Yes. Rochelle nodded. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. No further questions. Crawford stood for cross-examination, but his heart was clearly not in it. He asked a few perfunctory questions about company policies and documentation, but he could not shake Julian's testimony. The timeline was clear. The evidence was overwhelming. Hartley Tech had developed the technology first, rejected the flawed version and continued innovating. TechVault had built their product on stolen work that was fundamentally insecure. After Julian stepped down, Judge Richardson looked at the attorneys. Closing arguments will begin tomorrow morning at 9. Court is adjourned. As people filed out, Rochelle and Julian remained seated, both too emotionally exhausted to move immediately. They had done it. They had proved their case. Now it was up to the jury. I am proud of you, Julian said softly. So incredibly proud. We make a good team, Rochelle replied. We do. The best. They left the courthouse together, walking through a sea of reporters shouting questions. But neither of them answered. They just kept walking side by side, knowing that tomorrow would bring either vindication or disaster, but knowing also that whatever happened, they had given it everything they had. The conference room in Julian's office was bathed in evening light. They had ordered dinner, but neither of them was eating much. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments, and then the jury would deliberate. Everything they had worked for would come down to 12 people making a decision. Rochelle was reviewing her closing statement, making notes and adjustments. She wanted it to be perfect, clear and simple. No legal jargon that would confuse the jury. Just the truth, laid out in a way anyone could understand. You should eat something, Julian said, pushing a container of pasta toward her. I am not hungry. You are nervous. Of course I am nervous. This is the biggest moment of my life. Your life. Everything depends on tomorrow. Julian set down his own food and came around the table to sit beside her. Rochelle, no matter what happens tomorrow, you have already won. How can you say that? If we lose, you have to pay $700 million. And if we lose, I will deal with it. But what you have accomplished in the past week is extraordinary. You walked into that courtroom as a janitor. You left as one of the best trial attorneys I have ever seen. You have a future now. A real future. That cannot be taken away regardless of what the jury decides. Rochelle felt tears welling up. The stress and exhaustion of the past week was catching up with her. I just wanted to help you. I wanted to do something that mattered. You did. You saved my company. You saved me. And I want to make sure you understand how grateful I am. You have already done so much. Tyler's treatments. I want to do more. Julian took her hands, and the warmth of his touch made her heart skip. Rochelle, I want to pay for you to complete your law degree. Not just pay. I want you to go to the best school you can get into. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, wherever. I will cover tuition, living expenses, everything. I want you to have the education you deserve. Julian, that is too much. It is not enough. You saved my company. $700 million. The cost of law school is nothing compared to that. But I do not want you to feel like you owe me. I do not feel like I owe you. I want to help you because you are brilliant and talented, and the world needs more lawyers like you. Lawyers who care about justice, not just winning. Lawyers who see people, not cases. Rochelle wiped at her eyes. I accept. And I promise I will make you proud. You already have. They sat in silence for a moment, their hands still joined. Then Julian spoke again, his voice softer now. There is something else I want to ask you. What? When this trial is over, when you go to law school and pass the bar, I want you to come back to Hartley Tech. I want you to be our general counsel. Not as a favor. Not out of obligation. But because I believe you would be the best person for the job. Rochelle's breath caught. General counsel? That is a huge position. You earned it this week. You proved you can handle pressure, think strategically, and fight for what is right. That is exactly what I need. I would be honored. Yes. Of course, yes. Julian smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Good. That is settled then. Now we should talk about your salary. I have not even finished law school yet. I do not care. Name a number. Julian, I cannot. 300,000 a year to start, plus bonuses based on company performance. And full benefits including complete medical coverage for you and Tyler. Rochelle stared at him. 300,000 a year. More money than she had ever imagined having. That is too generous. It is market rate for a general counsel at a company our size. Maybe even slightly low. You are worth it, Rochelle. Stop selling yourself short. I accept. Thank you. I cannot tell you what this means to me. Julian stood and pulled her to her feet. They were standing close again like that moment in the office a few days ago. But this time neither of them pulled away. You changed my life, Julian said softly. You walked into that courtroom and you changed everything. You changed mine too, Rochelle whispered. You gave me hope when I had none left. They were leaning toward each other now, the space between them shrinking. Rochelle could feel her heart pounding. She knew they should not do this, not yet, not until the trial was over and the professional boundaries were clearer. But she wanted to. She wanted to feel his lips on hers, wanted to know if the connection she felt was real. Julian's phone buzzed, loud and insistent. They broke apart, both of them breathing hard. Julian checked his phone and smiled. It is the hospital. Tyler's doctor. He says Tyler's latest test results are excellent. The treatment is working even better than expected. Rochelle felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but they were happy tears this time. Really? Really? He says Tyler could potentially be discharged in a few weeks if he continues to improve. She covered her mouth with her hands, overcome with relief and joy. Julian pulled her into a hug and this time she let herself lean into him completely. He was solid and warm and she felt safe for the first time in years. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for saving him. You saved him. You never gave up. You worked 2 jobs, studied law at night and still showed up every day to take care of him. That is what saved him. I just provided resources. They held each other for a long moment, and Rochelle realized that what she was feeling was more than gratitude. More than professional respect. She was falling for Julian Hartley. Maybe she had been falling for him since that day she burst into the courtroom, or maybe even before, during all those late nights when she cleaned his office and read his case files, learning about the man behind the billionaire facade. When they finally pulled apart, Julian cupped her face in his hands. After the trial, he said. After we know the outcome and the dust has settled, I want to take you on a real date. Not a working dinner. Not a strategy session. Just you and me, getting to know each other without the weight of the world on our shoulders. Would you say yes? I already said yes once. My answer has not changed. He smiled and the tenderness in his expression made her chest ache. Good. Because I think you are the most remarkable person I have ever met, and I want to spend time with you. A lot of time. I want that too. They spent the rest of the evening working on her closing statement together, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a lightness between them now, a promise of something beautiful waiting on the other side of tomorrow's verdict. When Rochelle finally left to go home around midnight, Julian walked her to her car. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow is a big day. I will try. You too. Rochelle? Yes. Win or lose, I want you to know that meeting you, working with you, has been one of the best things that has ever happened to me. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek, a brief press of her lips against his skin. I feel the same way. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Rochelle felt something she had not felt in years. Not just hope but genuine happiness. Tyler was getting better. She was going back to law school. She had a job waiting for her at one of the most successful tech companies in the country. And she had found someone who saw her, really saw her, and valued her for who she was. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, she believed that everything was going to be okay. The courthouse was a circus. News vans lined the street, satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Protesters stood on one side of the steps with signs supporting Julian, while another group on the opposite side held signs about corporate greed. Police officers maintained a barrier between the groups, and reporters pushed forward, trying to get quotes from anyone who would talk. Rochelle and Julian made their way through the crowd, flanked by security. She was wearing a maroon dress today, professional and confident. Julian wore a navy suit. They looked like a team. A real team. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. Rochelle recognized several high-profile journalists, a few celebrities who had taken an interest in the case, and even some politicians. This trial had become about more than just one lawsuit. It had become a story about underdog triumph, about justice, about whether the little person could stand up to the system and win. Judge Richardson took her seat and looked out at the packed room. Before we begin closing arguments, I want to remind everyone that the jury's decision, whatever it may be, deserves respect. This court will tolerate no demonstrations, no outbursts. Is that understood? Everyone nodded. Mr. Crawford, you may give your closing statement. Crawford stood. He looked like he had aged 10 years over the past week. His expensive suit could not hide his defeat. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, you have heard a lot of testimony over the past few days. The defense has tried to paint my client, TechVault Industries, as the villain in this story. They want you to believe that one of their former employees stole from them and then convinced an entire company to file a fraudulent lawsuit. But that is not what happened here. He walked toward the jury box. What happened is that a brilliant programmer, Derek Palmer, created innovative technology. Yes, he worked at Hartley Tech first. But the technology he developed at TechVault was new, different, better. The defense has shown you an old project, CypherX, but that project was abandoned. It was incomplete. What Derek created at TechVault was the finished version, the version that actually worked. Rochelle watched the jury carefully. Some were listening to Crawford, but several were shaking their heads slightly. They had heard the testimony. They knew the truth. Julian Hartley is a wealthy, powerful man, Crawford continued. He has resources that my client cannot match. He hired an expensive legal team. And when his lawyer did not show up, he found someone else to fight for him. But wealth and power do not make someone innocent. The evidence shows that Hartley Tech updated their software after TechVault filed their patent. That timing is not a coincidence. That is theft. He returned to his table. I ask you to look at the facts, not the emotional story the defense has tried to tell. Look at the evidence. And if you do, you will see that TechVault Industries deserves compensation for the technology that was stolen from them. Thank you. Crawford sat down. It was a weak closing and everyone knew it. The case had fallen apart and he was just going through the motions now. Ms. Bennett, Judge Richardson said, you may proceed. Rochelle stood and walked to the center of the courtroom. She had memorized her statement, but she did not need notes. She knew exactly what she wanted to say. Members of the jury, my name is Rochelle Bennett. 1 week ago, I was cleaning floors in the Hartley Tech building. I was a janitor. I wore a green uniform and pushed a mop cart. And when I walked into this courtroom and said I could represent Julian Hartley, you all laughed. Remember that? The laughter. Several jury members nodded, looking embarrassed. I do not blame you. I would have laughed too. A janitor defending a billionaire in a $700 million lawsuit? Sounds like a bad movie. But here is what you have learned over the past week. Titles do not matter. Uniforms do not matter. What matters is the truth. She walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each person. The truth is simple. Julian Hartley built a company based on innovation and hard work. He developed encryption technology to protect people's data because his mother was affected by a data breach. He wanted to make the world safer. And he did. Hospitals use his software. Schools use it. Government agencies use it. Millions of people are protected every day because Julian Hartley refused to cut corners on security. She paused, letting her words sink in. Derek Palmer worked for Julian. He was talented, but when he designed the CypherX algorithm, it had serious security problems. So Julian made the responsible choice. He rejected it. He told his team to keep working to find a better solution. And they did. Rochelle pulled up the timeline on the screen. Look at these dates. August 2018, Derek creates CypherX. October 2018, security testing reveals critical vulnerabilities. The project is archived. July 2019, Derek leaves Hartley Tech. But we have seen the emails. Derek was already talking to TechVault while he was still employed. He took the rejected CypherX design with him. And in 2021, TechVault filed a patent on that same design. She turned to face the jury directly. The prosecution wants you to believe that Julian stole from TechVault. But the evidence proves the opposite. Derek stole from Julian. He took a rejected design that belonged to Hartley Tech, presented it as his own work to TechVault, and then had the audacity to sue his former employer when they continued to innovate in the same space. Several jury members were nodding now. Here is what makes this even worse, Rochelle continued. The CypherX design had security flaws. We know this because Hartley Tech's testing found them. But Derek ignored those warnings. He convinced TechVault to build their product on that flawed foundation. And what happened? 6 months after launch, security breaches. Millions of people had their personal information stolen because Derek Palmer was too proud to admit he had taken a rejected design. She walked back to the center of the room. This lawsuit is not about protecting intellectual property. It is about Derek Palmer trying to cover up his theft and his mistakes by attacking the man who refused to compromise on security. It is about a competitor trying to destroy Julian's company because they cannot beat him in the marketplace. Rochelle's voice softened. I came to this courtroom 1 week ago because I believed in Julian Hartley. Not because he is rich. Not because he is powerful. But because I had spent 4 years cleaning his office, reading his documents, watching him make decisions. And I saw a man who genuinely cared about doing the right thing. A man who built a company to help people, not exploit them. She looked at Julian, who was watching her with an expression of such warmth and pride that it made her heart swell. The defense is not asking you to feel sorry for a billionaire. We are asking you to look at the evidence and see the truth. Julian Hartley developed this technology first. Derek Palmer stole it and took it to a competitor. And now they are suing because they cannot compete honestly. Rochelle turned back to the jury. You have a choice to make. You can reward theft and deception by giving TechVault $700 million. Or you can stand for innovation, integrity, and the truth. You can tell Derek Palmer and TechVault that you cannot steal someone's work and then sue them when they keep moving forward. You can vindicate a man who has spent 8 years building something that makes people's lives safer. She paused, letting the silence stretch out. Justice is not about who has the most expensive lawyer or the best-dressed witnesses. Justice is about doing what is right. And the right thing here is clear. Julian Hartley is innocent. Please find him not guilty on all charges. Thank you. As Rochelle returned to her seat, the courtroom was completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Everyone was processing what they had heard. Judge Richardson turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all the evidence and arguments. It is now your responsibility to deliberate and reach a verdict. Please remember that your decision must be based solely on the evidence presented in this courtroom and the law as I have instructed you. The bailiff will escort you to the jury room. The jury filed out. The courtroom erupted in conversation as people stood and stretched, preparing for what could be a long wait. Jury deliberations could take hours or even days. Julian turned to Rochelle. That was perfect. You were perfect. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You made them see what I built and why it matters. You made them care. They sat in the courtroom for the next 3 hours waiting. Every time the door opened, everyone jumped, wondering if the jury was returning. But it was always just a clerk or a security guard. Finally, at 2:30 in the afternoon, the bailiff emerged. The jury has reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. Within minutes, everyone was back in their seats. Judge Richardson returned to the bench and the jury filed in. Rochelle tried to read their faces, looking for some sign of which way they had decided, but they were carefully neutral. Madam Foreperson, Judge Richardson said, has the jury reached a verdict? A woman in her 50s stood. Yes, Your Honor, we have. Please read the verdict. The foreperson held up a piece of paper. In the matter of TechVault Industries versus Hartley Technologies, we the jury find the defendant, Julian Hartley and Hartley Technologies, not guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted. Cheers and applause mixed with gasps of surprise. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Judge Richardson slammed her gavel, trying to restore order, but no one was listening. Rochelle sat frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. They had won. They had actually won. Julian turned to her, his eyes bright with tears. You did it. You actually did it. And then he was hugging her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around in the middle of the courtroom. She laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief, and wrapped her arms around his neck. When he set her down, they were both crying and laughing at the same time. Judge Richardson finally restored order. Mr. Crawford, the prosecution is dismissed. Mr. Hartley, Ms. Bennett, congratulations on your victory. This court is adjourned. As they left the courtroom, reporters surrounded them, shouting questions. Ms. Bennett, what are you going to do now? Mr. Hartley, are you going to sue TechVault for damages? Is there a romantic relationship between you two? Julian held up his hand. We will make a statement at Hartley Tech headquarters tomorrow. Right now, we just want to celebrate. They made it to the car and collapsed in the back seat, both of them still in shock. I cannot believe it, Rochelle said. I actually won a $700 million case. We won, Julian corrected. We did this together. I need to call Tyler. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed the hospital. When her brother answered, she could barely speak through her tears. We won, Tyler. We won. I knew you would, Tyler said, his voice weak but happy. I never doubted you. That evening, Julian threw a celebration at his office. The entire staff was there, along with the board of directors and key clients. Everyone wanted to congratulate Rochelle, to shake her hand, to hear the story of how a janitor had saved the company. Around midnight, when most of the guests had left, Julian and Rochelle found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace. The city spread out below them, a sea of lights and possibilities. I have something for you, Julian said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Rochelle opened it and found a check. A very large check. Julian, this is $2 million. Your bonus for winning the case. I told you I would take care of you. This is too much. It is 5% of what you saved me. Actually, it is less. You saved me way more than $40 million. You saved the company. You saved me. He took her hands. Rochelle, I know we said we would wait until after the trial, but I cannot wait anymore. I think I am falling in love with you. Her breath caught. Julian, you do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know. You walked into my life when I was at my lowest point, and you reminded me what matters. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and I want to spend every day getting to know you better. Rochelle felt tears streaming down her face again, but they were happy tears. I think I am falling in love with you too. I have been since the moment you trusted me enough to let me represent you. Julian cupped her face in his hands and leaned down, pressing his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet and perfect, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. So, Julian said, are you ready to change the world together? Yes, Rochelle said. I really am. They stood on that rooftop, holding each other under the stars, knowing that this was just the beginning of their story. 6 months had passed since the trial ended, and the world looked completely different. Rochelle stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom place in a building that offered views of the park. Tyler lived with her now, healthy and thriving. His cancer was in remission, and his doctors were optimistic about his long-term prognosis. He was back in school, catching up on everything he had missed and talking about maybe becoming a lawyer himself one day. Are you nervous? Tyler asked, appearing in the doorway. He was taller now, having gained back the weight he had lost during treatment. His smile was bright and genuine. A little, Rochelle admitted. She was wearing a green dress for today's event, professional and elegant. This is a big moment. You are going to be amazing. You always are. She had spent the past 6 months completing an intensive law program that Julian had arranged. It was not traditional law school, but a condensed program designed for people who already had significant legal experience. She had taken the bar exam 3 weeks ago, and the results had come yesterday. She had passed. Today was her official swearing-in ceremony as a licensed attorney. And tonight was an even bigger event, a celebration at Hartley Tech to announce her new role as general counsel. Julian arrived to pick them up in his car. He had been by her side through everything over the past 6 months. They had taken things slowly, dating properly, getting to know each other outside the pressure of the trial. They had gone to museums and restaurants, taken walks through the park, spent quiet evenings at home watching movies and talking about their dreams. They had not told anyone at Hartley Tech about their relationship yet. They wanted to wait until Rochelle was officially the general counsel, to avoid any appearance of impropriety. But everyone suspected. The way they looked at each other made it obvious. Ready? Julian asked when she opened the door. He was wearing a blue suit and looked incredibly handsome. Ready, she confirmed. The swearing-in ceremony was brief but moving. Rochelle stood before a judge, raised her right hand, and swore to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state. When it was done, when she was officially an attorney, she felt like she had finally completed the journey she started so many years ago at Columbia. Her mother and father would have been so proud. That evening, the Hartley Tech building was transformed. The top floor had been decorated for a celebration. Employees from every department were there, along with board members, clients, and even some journalists. Everyone wanted to meet the woman who had won the impossible case and was now taking on one of the most important positions in the company. Julian stood at the front of the room and called for everyone's attention. Thank you all for being here tonight. 6 months ago, our company faced the greatest threat in its history. We were being sued for $700 million. Our attorney had abandoned us. Everything we had built was at risk of being destroyed. He looked across the room to where Rochelle stood. And then someone extraordinary stepped forward. A woman who had been working in this building for 4 years, studying, learning, preparing for a moment she did not know was coming. Rochelle Bennett saved this company. She saved all of our jobs. She reminded me what Hartley Tech was built to do: protect people, help people, make the world a better place. Everyone applauded. Rochelle felt her cheeks warm. Tonight, I am honored to officially announce that Rochelle has accepted the position of General Counsel at Hartley Tech. She has completed her legal education, passed the bar exam, and is now a licensed attorney. But more importantly, she is someone who understands what this company stands for. Someone who cares about our mission and our people. I can think of no one better to guide us legally as we continue to grow. The applause was deafening. People came forward to congratulate Rochelle, to thank her, to tell her how much her victory had meant to them. She shook hundreds of hands, accepted dozens of hugs, and smiled until her face hurt. Later in the evening, when the crowd had thinned somewhat, Julian found her on the rooftop terrace, the same place they had kissed 6 months ago. "How does it feel?" he asked, handing her a glass of champagne. "Surreal. I keep expecting to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It is real. You earned every bit of this." They stood together, looking out at the city. "Julian, I have been thinking. Now that I am officially your general counsel, we need to be transparent about our relationship. We cannot keep it secret anymore." "I agree. I want everyone to know. I want to take you to company events as my partner. I want the world to see what you mean to me. People will talk. They will say I only got this job because we are together. Let them talk. Anyone who has seen you work knows you earned this position. And anyone who does not believe that does not belong at this company." Rochelle turned to face him. "I love you, Julian. I do not think I have said it enough. But I do. I love your integrity, your passion, your kindness. I love the way you care about your employees and your mission. I love everything about you." Julian set down his champagne and pulled her close. "I love you too, Rochelle. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. You challenged me, pushed me, made me remember who I wanted to be. You saved my company, but more than that, you saved me." They kissed as the city lights sparkled around them, and Rochelle felt like the luckiest person in the world. A month later, they made their relationship public. The media went crazy for the story. The janitor and the billionaire. The underdog lawyer and the tech mogul. It was a fairy tale, they said, except it was real. Rochelle threw herself into her work as general counsel. She reviewed contracts, advised on legal strategy, worked with the compliance team to ensure Hartley Tech maintained the highest ethical standards. She created an employee assistance program to help workers like she had been, people who were struggling financially or personally. She made sure everyone had access to the benefits and resources they needed. She also started a mentorship program, working with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who were interested in law. She told them her story, showed them that where you start does not determine where you finish. She became a voice for people who felt invisible, people who cleaned floors and answered phones and did the work that kept companies running but rarely got recognition for it. Tyler graduated from high school with honors and was accepted to MIT to study engineering. He wanted to follow in Julian's footsteps, to build technology that helped people. Rochelle could not have been prouder. One evening about a year after the trial, Julian took Rochelle to the small diner where they had eaten breakfast during the case. It was the same cracked vinyl seats, the same menu that had not changed since 1985. "Why are we here?" Rochelle asked, smiling at the nostalgia. "Because this is where I first realized I was falling in love with you," Julian said. "We were sitting at that table talking about the trial, and you mentioned your father bringing you here on Sundays. And I thought, this is someone special. This is someone I want in my life forever." Rochelle felt tears pricking at her eyes. "Julian?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Rochelle Bennett, you walked into my life when I needed you most. You saved my company. You challenged me to be better. You showed me what real courage looks like. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He stood up and moved to her side of the booth, pulling a small box from his pocket. He opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful ring, a single diamond on a silver band. "Will you marry me?" Rochelle could not speak. She was crying too hard, her whole body shaking with emotion. She nodded frantically, and Julian laughed and slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes," she finally managed to say. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The other diners in the restaurant had been watching, and they burst into applause. The waitress brought over free pie to celebrate. It was perfect, so perfectly them, celebrating their engagement in the same humble diner where they had shared that breakfast during the darkest days of the trial. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Tyler was Julian's best man. The wedding was simple and beautiful, held in a garden with white roses and clear blue sky overhead. Rochelle wore a red dress because she was done with being invisible, done with blending into the background. She was ready to be seen, to be celebrated, to claim her place in the world. As they danced at the reception, Julian whispered in her ear, "Do you remember that day you burst into the courtroom? How could I forget? Everyone laughed at you. But you did not let that stop you. I was too stubborn to quit." "You were too brave to quit," he corrected. "And because of that bravery, because you refused to let anyone tell you that you did not belong, you changed everything. You changed my life. You changed this company. You changed hundreds of lives through your mentorship program." Rochelle looked around the reception at all the people they had helped over the past year. Employees who had been struggling and now had resources. Young people who had found mentors and opportunities. Tyler, healthy and happy, dancing with friends his own age. "We did this together," she said. "I could not have done any of it without you believing in me. We make a good team. The best team." 5 years later, Rochelle stood in front of a classroom at Columbia Law School, invited to speak to first-year students about her journey. She told them about losing her parents, dropping out, cleaning floors. She told them about the night she found Julian's case files and the moment she decided to walk into that courtroom. She told them about the fear and the doubt and the laughter. And she told them about refusing to give up. "Success is not about where you start," she said to the packed auditorium. "It is about refusing to accept that your circumstances define your potential. It is about working when everyone says you should quit. It is about believing in yourself even when no one else does." A young woman in the front row raised her hand. "What would you say to someone who feels like they do not belong in a place like this?" Rochelle smiled. "I would say that feeling is normal. I felt it every day for 4 years while I cleaned offices and studied in my free time. I felt it when I walked into that courtroom in my janitor's uniform. But here is what I learned: belonging is not something others give you. It is something you claim for yourself. You work harder than anyone else. You prove your worth through action. And eventually, the world has to recognize that you belong because you made it impossible to ignore you." After her talk, dozens of students came up to thank her, to share their own stories of struggle and determination. She listened to each one, offered advice where she could, and reminded them that their dreams were worth fighting for. That night, she came home to find Julian in the kitchen cooking dinner. They had bought a house together, a beautiful place with a yard where they hoped to raise children someday. Tyler was living on campus at MIT but came home for holidays and summers. "How did your talk go?" Julian asked, kissing her hello. "It was wonderful. Those students have so much potential. So much hope. You give people hope, Rochelle. You always have." They ate dinner together, talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. It was ordinary and perfect. After everything they had been through, after the drama and the victory and the headlines, what Rochelle treasured most were these quiet moments. The normal, everyday life they had built together. Later, as they sat on the couch reading, Rochelle looked over at Julian and thought about that empty chair in the courtroom 5 years ago. That empty chair that had seemed like a disaster but had turned out to be the beginning of everything. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, noticing her gaze. "About how grateful I am. For you. For this life. For everything. I am the grateful one. You saved me, remember?" "We saved each other," Rochelle said. "That is what love does. It saves us and challenges us and makes us better than we ever thought we could be." Julian set down his book and pulled her close. "I love you, Rochelle Hartley. I love you too." They sat together in comfortable silence as the city lights twinkled outside their window. Somewhere out there were people who were struggling, people who felt invisible, people who were working multiple jobs and studying late into the night while the world overlooked them. Rochelle hoped her story would reach those people. She hoped they would hear about the janitor who represented the billionaire and won. She hoped they would see that circumstances do not have to define destiny. That hard work and determination and refusing to quit could change everything. Because kindness, hope, and love always lead the way. And sometimes, the most important victory is not winning the case. It is finding the courage to step into that courtroom in the first place, to claim your place at the table, to demand to be seen and heard. Rochelle had done that. And in doing so, she had not only saved a company and won a trial. She had proven that anyone, no matter where they start, can achieve extraordinary things. The empty chair had been filled. And the story that began with laughter and disbelief had ended with triumph, love, and hope for everyone who dared to dream. The end.